Yeah, man, I'm learning some D tunes in D, not in C too.
Yes, it's. I remember that being like almost like a defining period in my flat picking career when it was like all right, we're gonna master this open D thing. We're gonna figure out how to play a 5 chord like this. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is so, man, to have played guitar for over 20 years and return to the guitar and start playing bluegrass, and then to look at myself in the mirror and say, I don't actually know how to play an A chord. What should I do? You know, do I do the classic shape? Do I do the bar? You know,
Yeah,
it's
the
like, do I
long
do
A.
that? You know, it's like there was something about this. Is like, for some reason, now when I want this to sound like bluegrass, this chord feels weird to play the classic, like Mel Bay, first chord you ever learned, whatever. And there's plenty of good options. You know, there's the standard, there's the sus.
Sus2, which is like Tony
Seven.
almost all the time. I'm almost always an A7 kind of guy if I'm in the key
Yeah.
of D, you know?
It's pretty handy. Yeah.
Yep. Gives you an open
That-
string.
Exactly. Yeah. Give you, just to be able to grab that with no crowding, whatever it is. And you know, and I don't mind the I guess that's the kind of the Lester, right?
Yeah.
That's cool too, but that's a certain sound, you know.
Ooh. And like the economy of like pressing to get the pinky kind of like you know, like if you think about like the center of gravity of that like fulcrum that you're making, like you're putting a lot of like torque on the pinky, you know?
Yeah.
Almost have to like move your phone.
Yeah, well, we were at look, here's one thing. I'm calling it right now. Are you recording?
Yeah, I'm recording.
I'm recording. So we just started like 15 seconds ago is what I'm deciding. We were at Hayes Griffin, and I, Eli Gilbert, were at the Swannanoa gathering a couple weeks ago where the idea for this podcast came from. And I was teaching banjo. Hayes is teaching mandolin and guitar. And we were having a great time talking about guitar, playing some tunes, got into some jamming. And I've been working on this bluegrass guitar stuff. And we played a couple tunes in D. And I think we played St. Anne's Reel, and that was another jam. There's a bunch of tunes in D. And I saw Hayes was playing St. Anne's Reel in open D, no capo on the second fret, like I was playing. It's capo on the second fret, C position. Great. Hayes is playing out of D position. Oh, that's interesting. I know people do that, but I kind of like what I'm doing. That's fine. Get into another jam, bunch of D tunes come up, and somebody actually says, so you always do that, huh? You always do capo 2, C position. Interesting. I said, yeah, I guess I do. Maybe I should do something else. I just always seemed more comfortable. I learned a couple tunes that way, and now that's just kind of how I do it. And they said, yeah, I remember when I used to do that. Oh, wow. Okay.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Throwing shade, like the
Pretty
gloves are
much.
off at that point,
I know.
you know?
So what do I do when I come home? I come home and I say, okay, what are all these tunes I could play just to stretch a little bit, try to play them in D, which again, you know, play guitar for such a long time. Such a small amount of it is bluegrass guitar, so you'd think, like, I know where the notes are. I know how to play in the key of D. What about that sounds like I don't know how to play in D? But it's that open B string, fretted B string, open E string, fretted E. You know, how do you know? And so, just humbling myself at the tiny details that would trip me up on that sort of thing. That's where I'm at with that. All of that to say, welcome to the first episode of the Flatpicking Podcast with myself, Eli Gilbert, and
Hayes Griffin. Oh yeah, here we are, man. I love that that's how we started it, because if you followed that conversation up to this point, you know exactly what this podcast is about.
yes, you know as well as we do, which is to say, not very much. But at this great camp we were teaching at, the Swannanoa gathering, we had this idea that after many conversations lasting many hours, talking about all things music and flat picking, and wanted to continue that, and thought this might be a nice avenue to do so, and maybe fill in some of my own gaps in my flat picking knowledge. So you know. Selfishly, this is my opportunity to take a lesson with Hayes Griffin every week for free.
It's the way I see it, man, we're walking the path together, you know?
I'm so glad you feel that way.
That's great, dude. Yeah, it's kind of amazing to think too. You kind of brought it up that this kind of came out of some personal maybe goals or needs for you. You know what I mean? Like you were in your journey to find information about the flat-picked acoustic guitar. You were like, oh, podcast. There's got to be a podcast out there that I can like listen to. And then it quickly became apparent that like, oh my gosh, why has nobody done this? Right? You know?
Why aren't there two guys just yapping about flat picking every week for me to listen to while I'm driving or doing the dishes? Why, do I have to do this myself?
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to think about triads while I'm stuck in rush hour traffic. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I don't want to feel alone. I want to feel like my flat picking friends are there with me. But really, I thought about, the idea. It's like, what a great way to learn about something. Is sharing your journey, learning about stuff. And that's what I've been doing on my YouTube channel, where I've been showing practice logs, just like, here's what I'm practicing playing bluegrass guitar. And I found that that's a really great way to kind of keep yourself accountable and just kind of measure progress or just kind of share your experience. And other people seem to like that. And I had this idea about a podcast, but I honestly almost was not even going to go through with it because, it's not something I could actually do on my own without a huge amount of, either research or whatever it was. It wasn't going to make sense if it was just me talking about these things that I don't necessarily understand. And it wasn't until we got together and hung out at Swan and Know, and I said, this is the answer. It was not that I was going around saying, who am I going to choose to do this? It was like, I don't know if I can do this. And then, oh no, Hayes is the reason this can happen, actually. And
well, it's almost like the formats of our conversations took what we would want the format of the podcast to be or something like that, right? Like we just got down so many rabbit holes with practice habits or repertoire or whatever, whatever it happens to be with this lovely thing that is the flat-picked acoustic guitar.
and what is the flat-picked acoustic guitar? Because you brought this up right before we started, and it reminded me, bluegrass is such a funny artistic culture in that in bluegrass banjo, mandolin, guitar, every instrument that you would kind of talk about bluegrass, or, we could say old time even, but bluegrass especially seems to have some really kind of interesting nomenclature associated with each instrument that's everyone understands what it is. But if you kind of dig a little deeper, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense as to why that is the specific name. A great example, you're playing banjo, is melodic style banjo, which is a reference to a very specific style of playing in which you play a melody in a certain way. As if you don't play the melody every other time you play the banjo. It's a very confusing term, right? You could think single string. Well, you're not playing on one string, you're playing on multiple strings. There's so many of these that I find don't really explain what you're doing that clearly. And so when we think about flat picking guitar, we think about, that's bluegrass guitar, or
Absolutely.
Maybe that's old time guitar, right? The distinction being that you're using a flat pick as opposed to a thumb pick, finger picks, whatever.
Classical style, no picks at all, right?
Yeah. But other styles of music, like every other style of guitar where you use a pick, is not flat picking. Jazz guitar is not flat picking.
Well, I mean, Eddie Van Halen is my favorite flat picker alive.
He's your favorite flat picker. There you go.
Alive at one point.
So that's where it starts. It's like, culturally we would not say he's a flat picker, but he's using a flat pick. So what, in your estimation, what are we really talking about when we say flat picking?
I think when we say flat pick style, to me, like most things in bluegrass music, it goes back to a lineage. Bluegrass is obsessed, in my opinion, with like tracing like lines of influence. I don't know if you've found this, but even the style like melodic banjo, that's a milestone in the history of the three-finger banjo in bluegrass, right? So to me, I think the flat pick style, a lot of people see like this kind of 60s, like second generation of bluegrass start to incorporate it. Like we're talking like Clarence White, with the Kentucky Colonels, and Doc Watson is becoming more popular at this time, but notably not bluegrass, right? Like this is one of those distinctions that you have to make, is that like there's this like parallel thing that's happening, and like bluegrass isn't even really quite its own style yet. It's becoming one. So like that makes the the web of influence, I think, more nebulous and more like what we would see as like cross genre or something like that today. Mm-hmm. But I think like you start to see those influences be put in the front of bluegrass bands at that period in time. George Shuffler obviously played cross pick style with the Stanley Brothers in the 50s, and Don Reno did some flat picking, on those early records. But I think, to me, like I said, it's like a lineage kind of thing. I think most people go back to Clarence and Doc because those were like Tony Rice's influence, who became like the number one kind of, practitioner of flat pick acoustic guitar, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating because I always forget sometimes when we talk about the lineage of what we would call bluegrass, is we can kind of get this tunnel vision of like, that's the history of those things in bluegrass, but also it can feel like you're talking about that's the history of those things in music, generally speaking. Yeah. And sometimes there are certain things that are specific to bluegrass that's where that appeared in, Earl Scruggs playing. I'm a banjo player, so I'm going to keep referring to the banjo, but Earl Scruggs playing the way he did three-finger banjo with the picks in the specific way he did it, not the first three-finger banjo player, but the progenitor of that style. No matter where that goes from bluegrass, that started in bluegrass. The history of that part of bluegrass is the history of music. But then you think about what people were doing, how people were playing the acoustic guitar in these string bands, and then it kind of went from these like rhythm styles to maybe finger picking or using a thumb pick, eventually starting to use a flat pick. Those weren't innovations that were unique to bluegrass. And in fact, some of those things that people were doing were kind of special in terms of acoustic string band music and the type of amplification. But in the wider world of playing guitar in the 50s, not unusual, not special, technique-wise. If you think about players like Charlie Christian or, I
was going to say Django Reinhardt was playing a flat top acoustic guitar in a lead style 30 years before like a lot of the people we're talking about,
And with more facility and faster than anyone in bluegrass would get to. I mean, kind of ever, but for decades, for decades, no one would ever have that kind of facility with it in that style, which is not to equate that with musicality, certainly. Doc Watson doesn't have a responsibility to play as fast as Django. But it has
implications, like you're saying, though, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's fascinating. It's in a way, it's almost cooler to refer to it as, well, that's flat picking, because it doesn't say like this is the history of people playing guitar. It's more like this is where what we're doing comes from within our culture musically, but also then you can say like geographically, like culture in a bigger sense, that it's not just music. The people are saying, well, this is when this started happening for us. Like that's what culture is. That's what a community is like, by us playing this, whatever, we are part of the community that eventually started incorporating a flat pick. And, you got to be a little bit careful with that when you say, us, what does us mean? But it's like, that can be a big tent of anyone who's kind of interested in this stuff can say, those are the people that came before us that kind of developed this way of using these tools. I think that can be a pretty special thing also.
Yeah. I think that's kind of where my mind settles when I think about what is flat picking. And you notice we haven't talked about like minor pentatonic scales with a flat five, or what I mean? Like we haven't talked about like the mechanics or the theory of it, but I think it's important to tie it to those people and those generations where it came up. Like the 70s, in my opinion, were a very, very important time for flat picking. That was when the torch was passed off to Tony, and he kind of started doing his thing. Would you agree that like Tony Rice is maybe like the one binding element for all of us? Because like what bluegrass guitar player doesn't appreciate, in the way that like people talk about like the Beatles with pop and rock music, what I mean? Like Tony Rice, if we are to center on anything, maybe as a flat pick community, there's that one common influence, I would argue.
I think that's true. Yeah. Maybe another way of putting it is like, there's no way to escape the knowledge and influence, right? Like,
yes,
it's like your favorite player could be, Clarence White or Doc Watson. Plenty of people, that is their true, like, one main influence, whatever it is. But if you were alive before Tony was doing his thing, then there's a before Tony and there's an after Tony. And once after Tony, you're never getting out of that, right? You're never going to escape hearing people play that stuff or hearing him or being influenced in that, like, it's one thing to say, oh, Tony was the best. But if you just, you can subjectively say that, certainly, but you can also kind of objectively say, like, wow, you can really hear the things that he found from Clarence White and Doc Watson and his jazz influence, these things. You can just see that he, synthesized those in a way that no one had at a really high technical level, right?
Exactly.
Going back to the banjo, when you think about Earl Scruggs, like, not the first 3-finger banjo player, but there's a reason he's the one we talk about. Whether you like it or not, it's like the level of skill that he synthesized these things that no one had been able to do before. Tony did the same thing. So, I happen to really love listening to Tony, but even if you don't, it's like you can't escape the kind of achievement there of what that did and how that then affected everything,
Absolutely. And I'm thinking in my mind of the person listening to this right now who isn't a Tony fan. Maybe somehow they like don't like it, but like most of those people, and I grew up with a lot of those people who lived in the before Tony time and didn't appreciate things about the after Tony time.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Where's the melody? I would always hear that like when I'm a kid or something. But they always, like you're saying, even if you're not the biggest fan of his style and that's not what you're seeking personally, you're still comparing it to what he did.
Yes.
Yeah. There's like this inherent need to kind of like set it against what Tony did, even, you know what I mean? So,
Totally.
So like you said, it's inescapable. You can't get away from the fact that there was a Tony Rice in this style of guitar playing.
Totally. Oh, it's so funny. I mean, it's like in my own mind, I don't spend a whole lot of time kind of like thinking about, who's the best, is someone better than some, that doesn't really exist in my own like personal musical narrative. But obviously you talk with your friends about like, I like this record and that one and whatever. And it gets so close to this like sports analogy where, here coming from someone who actually doesn't watch basketball, but you say Michael Jordan was the best. No, LeBron's the best. And it's like, you can't talk about LeBron being the best without saying he's better than Michael Jordan or reverse. It's like, it becomes the conversation of like, and so then it becomes an interesting conversation because in both worlds, they lived in different worlds. The games were different, though, blah, 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 whatever it is. But like you think about, it becomes the standard by which things are kind of judged. And people make the mistake of kind of evaluating what Tony did as like, did he always play, like, is every solo the best? Is every choice that he made the best? Did he, they kind of look at like the note choices, like, oh, he plays that lick too much, or too many people now play that lick because of him, or whatever the thing is, right? And what they kind of miss is like, think about what earlier flat pickers did. That, again, this is not a qualitative thing. It's not saying they couldn't do as Tony did, or that they would have been better if they could do what Tony did, but all these previous flat pickers kind of had the ability that they had, and they had kind of their lane in a way. Like a lot of people just had the lane that they were in. And so like when these special people come along, they kind of have their lane, but they're able to impact a wide range of areas in music, right? And so the stuff that Tony would talk about, like when people would ask him about music, the stuff he talked about, he wasn't talking about himself. He was just talking about what he appreciated about music. But that was actually, all the things he talked about were the things that were amazing about him, right? Because those are the things he cared about. When he talks about timing or tuning is a huge one that people forget about, that like Tony was obsessed with tuning. And
had a
if
tuning
you think
fork,
about
right?
like with a tuning fork, and like, if you go listen, I was listening to Church Street Blues this morning. You go listen to anything on Church Street Blues. If you go listen to that classic recording of Shenandoah, it's like people forget how hard it is to get an acoustic guitar to sound like it's in tune. You can't tune it in tune and make it sound in tune. You have to. It's really complicated, and almost no one can do what Tony did in terms of tuning. And it's like, on top of all that, there's the stuff he played, there's the choices he made, the way he played it. But that attention was something that was new, it's kind of amazing. And so it's like, being a dead horse, but regardless of kind of people's like experience listening, it's like you kind of have to thank Tony for inspiring the people you do like now, who kind of have that to look to. Like anyone you listen to now probably has some big thing they got from Tony that otherwise maybe would not have been so right in front of their face as they listen to Manzanita 1,000 times or whatever it is. It's kind of staggering, the influence.
I would agree, man.
And I'll say, as someone who I don't spend a whole lot of time trying to play anything Tony played currently, like as I'm working all this stuff, I've learned a couple Tony things here and there. I've worked on some rhythm stuff, the Blue Ridge Cabin Home solo, and the 100 Years From Now solo. And in those are some of the most classic things he ever played. And I find myself going to those licks all the time, like many people do. And I kind of say to myself, I don't really want to do that. I don't really want to play, like it's great, but I don't really want to do. I kind of don't want to do that often because it's so, whatever. I like this thing you did, it's great. It's the best thing, but it's like, it's a long enough lick that as soon as you start that lick, people are like, the Tony lick, before it's even over. So I say all of this to mean like my appreciation and the stuff that I've learned from listening to Tony is so much bigger than the note choices, which I'm kind of avoiding for the moment, just because I'm checking out other stuff. So it's, I think you can have that appreciation while it's still separate from like an obsession with the licks or an obsession with the content.
Absolutely. I think his approach, because he almost argued for that in a lot of the interviews that you hear with him, right? That like his approach is the kind of important part, not what's generated from it. Like in another way to say it is like when Chris Eldridge is the one who tells this story, I think, where he was doing that kind of lesson deal that he had through Oberlin when he was going to school there with Tony, and would like sit with him for long periods of time, and they would just talk about style and influence, and not really like, it wasn't Tony teaching the licks. He was like, you need to sound like you, like stop playing that thing, and not like in a like mean way, but he's just like, what's your way of doing that, and maybe that's the thing that actually makes him that important mile marker in this style of guitar playing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He did something totally different that no one had done before. Now the guitar player gets nods for a solo in the bluegrass band. You know what I mean?
yeah, totally. And it's like as a depending on who you're playing with, it kind of creates an interesting push and pull of like, well, we're playing Blue Ridge Cabin Home. Should I nod to the solo? Like depending on who I'm playing with. When I play banjo on this stuff, there's plenty of JD Crowe stuff that I'm like, yeah, I'll do the JD Crowe solo on this for fun, and people kind of think it's neat.
Yep.
Like there's a fun to that. But Tony didn't do that with, not that I can remember. I mean, I listened to a lot of older recordings, and he would learned a lot from Clarence White. He's not playing the Clarence White break to anything ever.
And this is where the Clarence White people would jump in and argue that like Clarence was also guilty of the same set of skills that I just put on Tony too. Like,
totally.
He did like who's ever done that kind of, you know what I mean? Like on the acoustic guitar, right? So like that's why these total Doc Watson, you know what I mean? He was one of the first guys who's like, I'm going to play Black Mountain Rag on the freaking guitar, and we're going to see how that goes,
Totally.
Yeah, so it's like this kind of finding their own personal voice and willing to challenge kind of like the boundaries of what role was predetermined by the band at that point in time,
Yeah. And one thing you got to think about too is, some of these players, it had to do with where bluegrass was at the time that they were doing what they were doing. I mean, it's going to be true for anyone. Like, Clarence White was bluegrass famous, and Doc Watson was famous kind of.
Yeah.
Not like Tony eventually was, but definitely, more people know Doc Watson than know Clarence White.
He was part of the folk revival circuit, right?
Totally.
Whereas bluegrass was sometimes just even like kind of restricted to its own like bluegrass thing. It wasn't like totally included in the folk revival thing, right?
Which you think about, it's like at the height of Tony's fame, he probably was more famous than Doc ever was. But I also think that the way that Doc was famous has made him, real world famous longer. Tony's influence it's there, absolutely. Will continue to be there. But Doc kind of like, because of the folk revival stuff, is like the number of statues and like memorials and festivals and like the North Carolina history of it all. And like, so it's kind of fascinating. Like depending on when you start and what the media consumption is like and how media, like were you able to be on TV? Were you able to be on the radio? Whatever, that kind of thing was really going to affect that. And not to say that that's the big picture of whatever, but it's fascinating, like that a lot of this stuff does have to do with, I don't want to say marketing exactly, but it kind of is. It's like, what's the available market that you can kind of be in front of, but that's a little aside outside of the flat picking itself,
Oh, but I think it's important to bring that up though, like you said, because Doc, I think for all the reasons we just talked about, was never really considered bluegrass. Like it's almost kind of a snobbish thing. Like if you have like a true bluegrass fan and someone calls Doc Watson bluegrass, they're going to be like, well,
yeah.
Like it turns into one of those conversations pretty quick. So, like I said, I think it's important to make that distinction because I think there's a reason that people, think that way with the style. And Tony was ours. He was a little more, like underground or whatever,
Yeah. When you think about too, like being bluegrass famous, it's like Bluegrass Album Band, those records, the blueprint that gave everyone to say, okay, we're going to keep playing the Flat and Scruggs stuff. And now everyone has their specific job they can do at the jam. And everyone knows the songs that everyone's going to know. And it's like that had its impact. Yeah, it's like if you go and you want to do Walk On Boy, like Doc Watson, there's a much lower chance that everyone at every jam is going to be like, oh yeah, great, let's do it. Just like on the record, as you would if you said like Big Spike Hammer.
Exactly.
Which people know because of Bluegrass Album Band, not because of the Osborne Brothers. Maybe they do, but probably because these days, if you're, just getting into it, that's where you're going to hear it. So, that kind of has an impact also. But back to to your kind of intro to flat picking is like, that's also what's cool about flat picking is like when you talk to bluegrass guitarists or flat pickers, it's so funny because I say bluegrass guitar, but really I should be saying flat pickers because you get around these people and it's like we have our own set of tunes that we know that other instruments don't think about as much. There are artists we listen to that other instruments don't necessarily listen to as much, we have that share. It's like that Venn diagram. We share stuff with the bluegrass community, but there really is kind of like a flat picking specific thing I think also.
Yeah. If we're talking about the edges of like those like Venn diagram overlaps, like to me, Julian Lodge is one of those guitar players that like flat pickers, like most flat pickers listen to that dude. And like mandolin, banjo, fiddle, maybe, you know what I mean? Like, I guess if they're in the know, if the flat picker in the band listens to Julian Lodge, then they probably heard of him, right? But totally. Yeah, I think they're right. Like he is to me the perfect example of that kind of like he's part of our flat pick world, but maybe not necessarily part of the bluegrass thing.
Yeah. Because especially you listen to the duo records, Julian and Chris Eldridge, and there's Whiskey Before Breakfast. There's stuff that's kind of in the bluegrass canon, certainly, but it never leaves flat picking. Even if it touches on bluegrass, it never leaves flat picking. And even to the extent that Julian is probably, I think seems like he spent a lot of time kind of digesting classic flat picking stuff and bluegrass, compared to what he probably grew up doing, but it's not his main world, but you can tell he's musically making choices that are not completely irreverent to kind of what that intended sound is, right? It's like they're really loose guidelines, but you can tell when you listen to that record, it's like that they're kind of meeting in the middle.
Absolutely.
In a way that they didn't have to, like you listen to, Brian Sutton has that track. I think it's Frizzell's Rag, maybe on one of his records. It's him and Bill Frisell. It's not definitely not bluegrass. And Bill is not attempting to flat pick. I think it doesn't seem. It's like Bill's just doing his own thing, right? It's great, but it's like you can tell there's a distinction where it's like, okay, is the goal here to be in that lineage, kind of intentionally, or is the goal here just let's just play something, which is great too, but you can kind of tell the difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to the type of musician, like, because I'm thinking about what are the common elements between Bill Frisell and Julian Lage, and they're both very like, their styles are hard to like box in by genre. You know what I mean? They're more like reactive players in that kind of way. They're like speaking musical language, and they can like maybe appropriate the accent of bluegrass when they're kind of in it, right? Like, but whatever sounds they're interacting with, they're always gonna maybe like respond to and replicate that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess we're just honing in on pickers that are friendly to the bluegrass style. They don't mind meeting in the you know, the colloquial space of
come on down
bluegrass
to our
flat
world.
picking.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, here's a question then for you. What would you say, because I'm now in this world, kind of, I spent so much time listening to bluegrass, which means by proxy listening to a ton of flat picking. But in the same way that we're talking about, like I wasn't listening to a whole lot of Doc Watson pre, you know, this kind of experience, right? Or when I was listening to records, I wasn't listening as closely to guitar as much as I am now. So I'm kind of like checking out a bunch of new records that I have forgotten about or re-listening or something. Was there, you know, and maybe this is a bit of your own flat picking history, but like, what was there an early record like that you just you totally wore out the record for the guitar? You were just like, that guitar playing makes me want to get into this and really do this, or if maybe after you had already gotten into it, but really kind of excited you more than you had been excited before, I guess.
For sure. My second guitar teacher made me like a compilation disc of some Doc and some Tony and stuff, and I was like, wow, these things are really compelling to me, but I didn't know what albums they came from. So I started searching stuff, and around that point in time, I was introduced to the Blake and Rice albums.
Cool.
And for me, that was when I was like when the acoustic guitar was just like totally front and center. There was like the bluegrass band wasn't there, and like Norman, like, you know, Doc wasn't exactly like a bluegrass guitar player, whatever you want to, you know, mean by that, right? Like he kind of transcended genre. So you could hear like some different old-timey kind of stuff in his playing, and I think the blend of those two voices and just kind of the pure natural acoustic guitar sound really captivated me when I was in my teens. Both of the Blake and Rice albums, I had to have both. Once I think I got the first one, and I was like, oh dude, there's a second, like, yeah, we got to check that out.
That's an incredible realization when you find out there's a sequel to something like that. You're like, oh my God,
thank God. and talk about tunes that we play to this day, you know what I mean? I think a lot of the standard rep can be, for flat pickers specifically, can be linked back to those couple of records, right? Yeah. Texas Gales, you know.
I was just playing with some of the students at Swananoa, some of the younger students, and the youngest of whom was like 9. Someone brings up New Chance Blues, just boom, right into it. People, you know, like this is stuff that people are just launching into like a standard. And you think about it, it's like these are not like other standards that we play. It's not like a Whiskey Before Breakfast or even Blackberry Blossom. Like some of these are, that's what's cool about some of this stuff is it can break through where it was never intended to be. Okay, this is traditional classic bluegrass, and so these are the songs we play. But it's like those walls are not as strong as they would have you think, because that stuff comes through, and it's like New Chance Blues is a kind of an odd tune that
flat
we've all
3
grown
and a flat 7
to.
chord, and then it modulates to the key of the flat 7 for the B part, right? You know,
Yeah, totally.
What's
Yeah,
not
of
standard
course.
about that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, totally. And it's there's so much of that stuff. Did you feel like what age was that when you were getting into that?
Yeah, I was probably at that age, I was probably like 16. I remember I started getting into those records because I was hanging out with my now best friend, Jacob Hawkins. He was like my, like my bluegrass buddy when we were teenagers. He played mandolin and studied with the teacher that I was taking lessons from, and I played guitar. And we were just like, I think he came over and he was like, I got some LPs that you want to check out. You know, we were like listening to vinyl, and he brought over Mondo Mando, you know, and nice. I was like, holy crap, like, what is this, you know, dog funk and all that stuff. But he had some of those Norman Blake and Tony Rice things, and that's where I was like, yeah, I gotta get a hold of those. So like 16, 17, something.
Nice. Yeah. Did you find yourself like digging into the specific stuff people like they were playing on the record? Did you end up transcribing much of it, or you like assume you learned some of the tunes, but were you ever like really checking out exactly like what they were playing?
Yeah, definitely. I was at that point in time, and this is what's funny, right? Like I was one of the ones who became obsessed with Tony Rice. I was like every note that he played on there, and I was less into Norman's playing, which now I'm almost kind of the opposite. You know, I was like I missed out on so much, but not just like because there's like I think you could say in a non-offensive way that like there's a simplicity to Norman's playing as compared to Tony's on those records that's actually very like true to the American folk vernacular and makes real good use of like chord shapes on the guitar and you know, it's just like really honestly complex stuff, but he's just not moving his right hand at 140 beats per minute as in eighth notes, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I remember transcribing a lot of the Tony stuff early on, and then in years after that being accused of never playing, like they're like, why are you doing, like you should learn the real C part to that tune or whatever, you know, like whatever it was, like
yeah,
you should
totally.
Yeah. Did you ever play just like the straight melody to Blue Ridge Cabin Home, Hayes? You know, did you ever try that? Like
totally. Yeah. That reminds me, there's a friend of ours, both of them, Tony Watt, amazing flat picker, and one of my favorite people to talk to about all this kind of stuff as well. We'll have him on this podcast at some point, whether he willingly or not. But he tells the story of he grew up that same way, obsessed with Tony Rice, specifically that classic like album band language, the stuff he would play over that 1-4-5 stuff, and it's what you hear everyone play. But I've never heard Tony play like that. But I think when he was younger, that was the stuff Tony Watt, now I'm talking about, was really into. And eventually he made that choice. He said, I'm going to make a concerted effort not to play any of that stuff. I'm going to come up with other ideas I want to play. I'll study other people, come up with whatever. And I don't know how long it took him, but at a certain point he said, okay, I'm not playing any of those licks anymore. I kind of made it out of the woods, right? And he went and kind of like as soon as he felt that way, he went and he was playing at a festival, and someone came up to the record table afterwards and said, hey, you know, you sound great. You sound just like Tony Rice. Which is like, that's kind of
no.
So again, in many ways, no escaping that sort of thing. Did you do anything in particular? I mean, because I'm in this space now where it's like I have a couple of these licks, which are everything about what he did is so great, but also there's so much function in that, like you can you can get yourself out of a corner you painted yourself into so easily by playing one out of the 5 most common licks, right? Not to speak down to what he did, but just like my use of it is like it just like it comes to mind immediately, and there, boom, I can do it. So I'm cautious about learning some of that at the moment because of for that reason, right? Which means I'm in a kind of a nice place where I don't have to kind of reconfigure everything I'm doing to try not to do that. But like to the extent that was what you were going through, how consciously did you really have to, like, because when I hear you play, I totally hear some stuff come through that's like, that could be, not like that's Tony Rice like number 5, but it's like, that could be Tony, you know, influence.
Tony adjacent.
It could be this. Yeah, exactly. It's like stuff does come out, but when I hear you, it's like, it is you. So what was that process like? Was it really intentional, or what did you do there?
I think it was, and it was intentional, and it happened much later than, you know, like this is how it always goes, right? Hindsight is 20/20. Much later than it should have.
Yeah.
You know? But I was out of grad school, so I had gone to New England Conservatory and got my master's degree, mainly to be in Boston and hang out around guys like Tony Watt. Like, no offense to NEC, I loved the degree I got there, but I knew that there was a bang and bluegrass community, and wanted to get my butt kicked. And I think I learned stuff like that, both like explicitly and implicitly from hanging out with guys like Tony, Matty Whitler, Gabe Hirschfeld, John Mylander, all the like class of people that was there while I was there. John McGann was my teacher for a couple years. They adjuncted him into NEC, and his approach was very like, he was like, your job should be to play the, like, step one is learn the most simple version of the melody that you can possibly hack out on any tune. Like, learn that simple version and then simplify it. You know, like yeah. Make like a half note melody or something like that for a tune. And then he's like, now our job is to look at those Tony Rice licks or those Norman licks or whatever we liked, or even better, and this was a McGann suggestion and a bunch of previous teachers, what are the fiddle players, banjo players, and mandolin players doing in the exact same spots in their solos where Tony Rice is putting those plug-and-play stock licks that you're talking about? So, like, yeah. I always play... Like, I love doing that on the guitar because, like, you know, it's like, thanks, JD, right? You know?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, totally.
So I think McGann was a big influence that way, in terms of just like one way to get much better at your individual style in flat picking was to look at the other instruments and maybe focus on like the common language of bluegrass music thing as opposed to the licks or phrases that were developed on your instrument. So yeah, that was like I was exposed to that at NEC. So that was like 2 years. And then I would say for 4 or 5 years after I got out of grad school, like my first road gig into my second road gig, this is what I was woodshedding. I was ear training. I was listening to melodies. I was mostly transcribing mandolin players and fiddle players at that point in time. I picked up the mandolin seriously during that period in time because I wanted to understand the vocabulary on another instrument. And then I think I tried to look at like what was the Venn diagram overlap between the guitar and the mandolin at that point. What were these common things that I needed to be focusing on? And melodies were the things. Melodies and the harmonic implications of those melodies. Like what chords were behind the melodies and how can you use the chord information to dress up the melody or vary the melody. That was kind of like where my mind landed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. No, of course. I mean, it's so fascinating because it kind of gives context to like what I sometimes think I'm trying to do and don't have a long amount of experience doing it with guitar, but it's like what you're talking about is what I've heard. Well, like for instance, the last time I was seriously playing guitar was when I was in college studying jazz guitar, and which is such a fascinating, like I didn't know it at the time, but I wasn't spending any time thinking about my right hand or left hand. It was all just like note choices. And then it's funny to come and play acoustic guitar. It's like, oh yeah, there's this whole technique thing that's going to make a giant difference if anyone ever hears a note that I play. But just in terms of that, like improvising, there's tons of players that people would kind of copy what they did. But so much of what was taught was kind of what's underpinning the choices people are making. And you can see like, well, why did they choose this color here, right? Whatever that was. And studying other instruments, right? Like guitar is fascinating in any genre because there's kind of like stuff that lays really well on guitar. And as soon as you play it, it's like, yep, that's guitar stuff, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and that's great too. I hear plenty of people play stuff like that and I play stuff like that and it's awesome. But guitar players, I feel like more than any other instrument have this desire to like go beyond guitar stuff.
Yes.
You know?
There's something like you're saying about the layout of the instrument that makes it, there are certain things that are just very proprietary, right?
Yeah.
And you figure it out as soon as you start to play a mandolin or something tuned in fifths evenly, right? You're like, oh,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like, wow, this is where the bluegrass language comes from. You know, you've just been using like a weird translator the whole time to figure out bluegrass language.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's true in jazz too. I mean, if you think about like, you know, bebop is a good example of like where improvisation kind of had a quantum leap in terms of complexity, harmonically especially. And it's like, you know, there was specific stuff that Charlie Parker or Dizzy Gillespie or, you know, Thelonious Monk or whoever, you know, was playing that was specific to their instrument, but they had a lot more similarities to what they were doing than guitar players of the era, right? Guitar players, it took actually a little longer for guitar players to start using the vocabulary from like 10 years earlier. People talk about Charlie Christian being an early bebop guitarist, but there was a lot of stuff that he did that was really different from whatever, he was playing guitar stuff.
Yes. There's a lick that I always go to. He played that in almost like every solo in some kind of fashion. And it's just this really cool, like you can look at it in a number of different ways, like half diminished pattern or something like that. But like you said, the fact that lick shows up so many times tells you that, like, wow, that must have felt really good under his hands.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Again, it's like you didn't hear him playing, the kind of enclosure. Eventually, guitar players played stuff like that. Like eventually Joe Pass and Pat Martino and Barney whatever, like a million people.
And now you're talking guitar players of the 60s and 70s, right?
It's kind of the same thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. I'd never thought about it in those terms. And part of it, I think in bluegrass, it's like, well, if you're in a string band, depending on the amplification, that's why they talk about the cross-picking stuff taking off the way that it did, or kind of the for the original kind of like bluegrass cross-picking to happen was kind of like a amplification issue, where it was like, play something that the people can hear that isn't just, like,
yes,
like we got to play something and it's got to be clear enough that people can hear it and whatever, so part of it is making a choice like that. But now that we're all kind of on even playing field, in a sense, kind of sometimes depending on the dynamics of the band that you're playing with, it's like, now we want to kind of check out what else is possible in the instrument now that it can be heard. So I totally did that with jazz guitar. I spent so much time listening to horn players. That was Dexter Gordon was like one of the big ones, or Coltrane certainly. And it's funny, I'm spending way more time thinking about guitar players now, obviously, just to kind of get acclimated with this world that I love guitar stuff in bluegrass.
Yeah.
But I've learned a couple fiddle solos. There's a Darrell Anger solo and a Mike Barnett. Like there's a couple solos on some fiddle tunes where I'm just like, the melodicism, the phrasing, it's just so beautiful. It's like, okay, well, I got to get some of this in here too. But I am kind of enjoying the guitar stuff. I mean, to the extent that it's possible, and the rare time that I really hit a G run just one certain way, it's like, all right, that's worth as much as the, it's like, that's why I play the JD Crowe stuff, is it feels good. It's like, okay, if you can get a good G run,
just like
that's
snaps,
enough.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why when what's the tune on, I don't know if he does it on this one, but on a Foggy Mountain Special. Is it Foggy Mountain Special? What's the classic guitar solo on one of those like blues tunes that's just G runs? Is that Foggy Mountain Special? Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Totally. It's on, I don't know if it is on that one, but it's on one of those tunes. And it's like,
I think it is,
Yeah, okay, yeah, it is that one.
Yeah.
I stopped listening after the banjo solo's over.
Yeah,
I just turned
exactly.
it off, so.
I mean, honestly, kind of same,
If you can play a G run worth something, I would do that. I would want to listen to that. Like,
oh man,
it's great.
That solo, or nailing it in Uncle Pen. If you're playing in a band, like that's threading the needle right there. That's like a high pressure scenario,
Yes. Well, I can't remember what I was doing. I played my first bluegrass guitar gig about a week ago. And it was really fun. It was with the great mandolin player Ethan Satiwan, banjo player Gretchen Bowder, and bass player Chris Day. That's just this local gig in Portland that I got put in charge of. And I said, okay, I'll do it on guitar then. And it was fun. It was great. But we were doing Head Over Heels, which when I think Head Over Heels, I think Flat and Scruggs.
Yes.
So that's, you just play it. You just play the song. But if Head Over Heels to you is Bluegrass Album Band, which I then, after the first chorus, I remembered that's the version we're playing right now, which is that there's a spot where you're supposed to play a G run. So it wasn't until I didn't play the G run that I realized, it's that version. And so, I've got the rest of the band looking at me as I'm just like, that was my G run, right? It's like I remembered with negative 0.0 seconds to get there, and then every time after that I was like, I got to prove myself and get a good one, which happened probably one time, but it did make me think of all the times I was playing a song like that Uncle Pen or something, and you jam and somebody misses, like, there's a G run, man. You can't miss that. You know,
Oh,
that's what I'm
dude.
thinking. And now I'm there. Now I'm living that nightmare.
It's there's a legendary story. I think it was at Bean Blossom. One of my instructors in college was telling me that James Monroe was playing guitar for the Bluegrass Boys and missed the G run on Uncle Pen on stage with his dad, and it was just like a, I think Bill even said something on mic, according to the story. I'm just like, that's got to be the ultimate, like, flat pick shame right there,
Yes, absolutely. Oh my God. Yeah, it's a different, oh man, and God, there's just different pressures, like, it's funny playing bluegrass guitar in a jam or a gig or something like that. I kind of always thought like, well, banjo, you got to be rolling the whole time. You're doing a lot of playing, whatever it is, but I kind of forget that like, it really doesn't matter how much of the chord you're playing at any one given time, or, it's like, there's a lot of options of different things you can play, different types of backup. You can play very little of each chord and still be doing your full job depending on the sound you want. But if you're playing head over heels, you're pretty much playing like boom chuck rhythm the whole time. And it really matters if you stop for a second or your pick slips a little bit or you miss a G run. And it's like, wait a minute, how many G runs do I play? Do I do one every time we get to here? Do I do one? I know I got to do one in the little gap in the chorus, but do I, it's like all these questions that I never thought about while practicing immediately came to the forefront. Like, things I never prepared for, about like, just like a level of consistency. I mean, so here's a question then out of all of that.
Yeah.
It's like you can practice like, here's how I play rhythm. Here's how I play a G run. And you get experience from jamming, obviously. But like, did you, like, where did you get your cues from in terms of like, did you have a time where you were like, okay, I need to figure out like, how often am I going to play a G run? What kind of rhythm am I going to play? Generally speaking, did you like look to anyone specific for that to emulate?
Yeah, so it's funny. This was not a setup. It was the album band where I figured out the formula. Because I started asking, I was like, how can Tony get away with playing all those weird... Because he was very active in his rhythm style at that point in his career. That's one way to put it, right? There's all the... like all that kind of like crazy stuff, But there was kind of a formula to it, and I've kind of codified it like in like the teaching curricula that I've developed and stuff. There are like these general parameters. Like you won't sound exactly like Tony Rice, but generally speaking, on beat one of measure one, he'll play a full chord and let it hang for like 3 beats and then come back in with his boom chuck. So that's almost like a way to like mark the top of the form, right?
Yep.
And then halfway through the form, I would notice he would often play like the quick G run, I call it, like like that kind of thing. So like I'm trying to think of a tune, Blue Ridge Cabin Home. I guess that one isn't great because the C chord happens halfway through the form.
Oh, sure.
But like sure. He does it on like Your Love Is Like a Flower. It happens on a D chord there, but
yeah.
And then at the end, you do a full one. So it's almost like there's like a capital letter at the beginning of the sentence, a comma in the middle to like, like link you up to the next phrase, and then like a big punctuation mark at the end. And realizing that those structures were kind of generally in play at, he would do different things at those points that like, but that's not almost not the point, right? The point is that something is happening in those like 3 key kind of like spaces. Yeah,
that's super interesting. It's great to hear this back from someone after having, for instance, at Swan and Noah Gathering, we were just teaching like, well, when do you play this kind of backup? When do you play that kind of backup? It's like, well, go listen, go see what JD Crowe does, go see what Earl does. And here I am, at my bluegrass guitar gig and be like, why don't I know when to play a G run or not? It's kind of amazing. It's like, there's no there's no amount of musical experience that can kind of like let you truly be your own teacher all the time. It's like, you got to ask questions. So I just got my money's worth on this lesson for sure. But
Nice.
but it's so interesting because I have spent a little time kind of, like I'll hear somebody play a really complicated example of kind of like Tony Rice rhythm stuff, and it's like it's got the like triple or quadruple downstroke stuff.
Yes.
That kind of thing, right? And I'm working on some of that because it is cool, and I like it's great. Very slow, but it's cool, and so I'm on the path with that, right? But I'll watch somebody play some really complicated stuff, and I'm like, wow, that is crazy. I can't believe somebody would do that all the time. But then you go watch a video of almost anyone playing, including Tony, including Wyatt, and they don't do that often. It's pretty rare that they're actually doing a full A section of crazy stuff like that. It's like maybe once in a while, but it's like almost never. They are mostly strumming, but it's cool to watch somebody do all that stuff and see what their tendencies are, so you can kind of lessen your responsibility to be like, am I going to be able to do this for the next 3 minutes? It's like, well, no one's asking you to.
yeah. Do I have to cross pick the entire tune?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think the Tony stuff is a good example of that, especially that cross picking thing, because that happens in that middle phrase a lot, like where the short G run would be. You'll hear him do like some of those cross pick things in that section instead. So that's a good example, in my opinion, of a thing that's like interchangeable with that, kind of spot. Yeah, man, I'm excited to see what you hear, because like everyone has their own kind of experience listening to Tony's rhythm, because there's just so much information going on. Like I said, if you're listening to those album band records, for sure, but it's it's the path is in there if you're willing to sort through the data.
Totally. Well, and Manzanita too. I never realized how much of that is in Manzanita, because again, I've listened to Manzanita probably not as much as, if I, as a banjo player, I think a lot of banjo players are less likely to put that one on, as it has no banjo player, unless you're going to play along with it. It's a great record to play along to for that reason. But, it's a great record. I just happened to have not listened to it that much. And then as soon as I started thinking about guitar again, as soon as I put it on, I was like, every moment of this has something. And which is not to say he's playing a busy stuff all the time, but just that being front and center, you can hear every choice that he makes. It's kind of astounding. And it's interesting too, because a lot of it is really hard to play. Like I won't sugarcoat that, in that it is like really challenging. Even the simple stuff that he plays, the way he plays it would be really hard to replicate. But it's not that it's hard to play and therefore it sticks out. There's a lot of stuff that's like in the background. It replaces the mini G run.
Yes.
It replaces that, but he's playing something way more complicated. It doesn't even stick out. It's kind of like that's how much he had it going on, is that he was like, well, here's an alternative you could play. It's probably not worth the effort for almost anyone else, and you will barely notice that it's there, but he does it and it's awesome, and it's like way better. There's a ton of stuff like that, not just the classic stuff we know that we hear him in a solo or something, but
dude,
and it's kind of it's astounding to watch them, and then to try to do it, especially the the triple down, whatever it is,
da 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 da, yeah,
that stuff especially, because even that stuff, you hear it in an example somebody plays as like a demonstration, and it is very clear, like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. It's all over the album band stuff, but it's pretty covered. Like that's not the main event. So
nah. You really do have to, like, if you're wanting to interact with that kind of information, Manzanita or Church Street Blues are like the best. Because like Church Street Blues is obviously, just his two guitars, often him like tracking over himself, right? But but yeah, you were talking about some of those things that could go in place again too, that are just nearly impossible to play. There's this one I've worked on since I was a teenager. The like. That's like almost like his like a G run for the end of a phrase, but like who's gonna play that, at 140? Totally.
Yeah.
So syncopated and nasty.
Which is cool, because you can see when there are people that are playing stuff they learned from Tony, and you can tell they're making sure everyone hears it.
Oh,
because it's like it took me years to get this. You're gonna know it, and it's like, okay, but that's behind the chorus while you're doing it. Like, you hear that happen all the time. If I could play it like that, I'm sure I would too. But that's it's what's fascinating, is like he just played it. It was just in there,
Yep.
which is kind of cool. I noticed the same thing listening to Clarence. Is totally a lot of that stuff comes from Clarence. A lot of the especially the cross picking stuff. I mean, so much of the cross picking Clarence did was down, down, up. So like whether it was the cross picking stuff or just like basically Clarence appears from the videos I was watching and stuff like that. Like it seems like he's just doing as many downstrokes as he possibly can, which results in a lot of down, down, up or whatever it is. There's if you watch that Mule Skinner live TV show, whatever it is, he plays, I need to learn the rest of this, but he plays the beginning of that solo on Dark Hollow, and it's like all of which is downstrokes. Every single note was a downstroke, right? And it's fast, a lot faster than that. And so there's a lot of that in there too. And he plays all these G runs that are kind of squirrely in weird ways that you're like, that's not the easiest way to play that, but if you can do it, it sounds awesome. Like,
and his timing is just so like fluid, right? The way that he plays over top of the rhythm section is nuts.
Totally. Yeah. Do you find like kind of on the topic of, because I do this all the time, playing banjo is here's stuff I'm working on, and then in a live situation, I'm maybe not going to reach so far for something that I'm not completely 100% confident, or doesn't just flow, right? Just because I could take the leap, but whatever. I'm not maybe as fearless as I might need to be to nail that kind of thing. Like, do you find are you going for it? Are you leaping to the thing that you're like, I think I can, if you got a certain like you're working on or something, or a pattern like that, do you find yourself like really going for it?
There are honestly fewer scenarios where that happens, than like playing it safe. But like Matt Glazer, I heard him give a good talk on this when I was like, I would like sneak my way into like Berkeley events when I was living up in Boston. And he was talking one time about like, instead of like pushing the upper boundary of your technical limits, like raising the floor of like what's your worst playing. What I mean? Like what's the, and when I kind of flipped that mentality, I was like, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of foundational things that I could be doing that would honestly get me through a tough scenario 90% of the time. Whereas that like reaching for it will get me the glory like 10% of the time. So what I started to do after hearing this Matt Glazer thing was almost like I wanted to play Don Reno style guitar.
Cool.
That's the way I thought about it. So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to play as many open strings and double stops on melody notes as I possibly can.
Cool.
And punctuate it all with a G run. And once I was able to just kind of like totally hit that, then I felt more comfortable. Like I would take more chances each set. You know what I mean? There would be one break where I could like really just kind of, if I was feeling it, if the band was pumping, we were warmed up, then I could, attempt the triple backflip or whatever.
Totally. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because that really, again, comes back to like, you have to have the melody so solid, understand what it is, and have a way to play it that's so solid that like, when you can tell something's like, oh, I'm about to fall, let's go back to the melody or something. It's like, it's not even that you're saving yourself. It's like you can almost make that choice rather than saying, if I don't land this, like I've got nowhere else to go. I think about banjo again is that one of the benefits of the Scruggs style language is if you learn like 10 Earl solos or 10 JD Crowe solos, you can pretty much handle any of the songs within the bluegrass world equally well. Like, it doesn't matter if you're playing Big Spike Hammer or Head Over Heels or Nine Pan, anything. It's all going to feel basically the same. The melodies are in a different place, but there's only so many melodies, and the language is very sound, right? No problem.
Yep.
Guitar doesn't have one specific way that they handle, first of all, anything, but especially like playing a melody. What is the bluegrass guitar version of a melody? There is no standard. So like what you just described is like you made your own. You're like, this is my foundation. I will always be able to fall on this. It's like, it sounds like kind of that's a thing worth doing, is like, okay, what's my basic language?
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but you're totally right. And, I think I developed that style, if we're going back to what I was talking about earlier, when I was listening to mandolin players and fiddle players. Because a mandolin player, if you listen to Bill Monroe with the Monroe brothers, it was all double stops and all melody all the time. They would play it at 200 beats per minute, but like, I think I was using some of that approach, in my guitar playing. Yeah. And it even makes me think about, I'm sure you think about this too, like how depending on what note the melody starts on, there's like a standard intro phrase for it, And I think it was around that time that I started to discover these things too, because if you listen to the banjos, mandolins, and fiddles, they're the ones who are always tasked with kicking off a solo or leading into a break, So, yeah, it's like guitar players do maybe in a way have to cobble together our own kind of baseline standard for what is just like simple melodic playing going to look like on this instrument,
Yeah.
And then how can we bridge the gap between that and what Doc or Norman or Tony or any of the guys were doing,
Yeah. Because especially, it's like you think some of these players really played the melody, and some, like, you think about Blue Ridge Cabin Home, Tony did not play the melody. So at all, basically.
Avoided it at all costs.
Yeah. But like you can hear in his playing his understanding of the melody and the phrasing. I mean, he was playing the song, definitely. He wasn't playing the notes of the melody, but he was definitely playing the song, and he was playing the sound of the band playing the song. So it's all, it gets pretty deep at that point. But like, you can easily, there's a pitfall. Here's an example of the only two Tony solos that I ever learned. There's Blue Ridge Cabin Home, which starts like this. And the 100 Years From Now solo that starts like this. So the timing is slightly different, right? I probably got it wrong in the second one, but it's the same thing. Neither of which is the melody for either song. So you could easily be like, well, then I guess I'll just play that all the time, and people do. But it's hard because the alternative is like, okay, if it's Blue Ridge Cabin Home, what am I going to do? Go, I'm not going to play that for my solo, as much as that's such an important thing to do. Like, I understand people not wanting to do that. Where's the middle ground? Where's the middle ground, right? But even still, it's like, okay, pat on my back for not playing the Tony Rice solo, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to do this every time. Okay, Head Over Heels, let's do that one. Your Love Is Like a Flower. Whatever. It's like, so everyone's, I'm going to have my overused licks. You've just not heard Tony play them. But like,
absolutely.
It's so it kind of, it's a bigger responsibility than for a banjo player who has a clear roadmap for here's how you can handle this idiomatically, whatever it is. Would you be able to give kind of an example? We're probably close to the end of our time here. Would you be able to give an example of like Blue Ridge Cabin Home, kind of how you would interpret the melody, actually the melody, but also like you would feel this is a real musical thing you might want to play?
Absolutely. So like just the quick overview of my process is to find that simple melody like you had, and I'll try to map it out in a way that like lends itself to guitarisms. So like, for example, I'm not the main melody note in that first phrase is a B note, but I'm going to play it as a fretted, because you've got got that lick and all that stuff right there, right?
It's pretty useful.
So my melody would look something like this. So I just map something like that out, obviously, for the second phrase too. And then literally step 2 for me is like, can I put double stops or open strings on as many of those melody notes and track the chord changes, You know what I mean? Like, and it's already kind of like a break at that point, right?
Totally.
So then step 3 is
tempo
easier.
with energy. Yeah. That totally works.
And I think like that's the point where I give it like that's a process that I run a lot of my private students through like daily, is like, how do we break this down and do this? And then for a guy like you, that's where I'm like, okay, there's the first 2 steps, and then now you've got all the stuff that you need to kind of do steps 3 and 4 or whatever, like you
Totally.
cross pick some of it, add some extra vocabulary that you got from Tony, right? You know what I mean? Like, and put all your, like,
yeah.
But then that melody, you're like tucking and weaving around it. You know what I mean? And
Totally.
then it's all of a sudden it sounds like that really crafty incorporation of the melody. So yeah, that's kind of my at least first couple steps there.
That's very cool. Yeah, and I think I this is how I feel, and so I imagine there's a bunch of people who could relate to this, who maybe have experience playing a lot of this stuff, and they have good stuff that they already play, which can almost be one of the more challenging times to learn, is when like, well, this is working for me, why would I mess with that, right? Or it's hard to feel like you're going back, but I feel like this, where no matter how much experience I have, there's probably a bunch of tunes I can't do that with. I could do that with a couple, but there's probably a ton of that I'd be like, wait a minute, where does the melody go? Or what is the, like there's tons of this. Okay, so there's a gap to fill in. The double stop thing, it's like, oh yeah, I could probably get that, but there's a couple weird spaces where you'd have to make a choice, or maybe instead of a third, you would get a sixth. It's like, what's the best option there? Okay, so that's something I probably don't have together. And then the third one is like, can I go through those 2 steps and then build the next thing without skipping the melody, without being like, okay, I know the melody, fine, no problem.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just in my mind, it's like, something like that's like, okay, it's like, well, that I went there, that could totally work. What if I had to play the melody though? Because that was a little bit of a cop out where I didn't play the melody.
That almost sounded like a Norman Blake kind of like riff on it. You know what I mean?
Totally, yeah, right. So it's like things like that. Where it's like, okay, I can kind of do a lot of that. I can't actually do all of that probably anywhere. It's like kind of, okay, so it's like, as with everything, it becomes, how honest can I be with myself about, like, do I want to be able to do that thing? Can I like humble myself at the reality of like, yeah, I can do a lot of stuff, but I can't do that really simple thing every time. So like that might be a massive, it's like, that's so cool. For anyone, if anyone who's listening to this, some people have a really hard time with that. I love that kind of thing where I'm just like, oh, I forgot something really important at home that's going to make my day so much better. Some people think of it as like, I have to go backwards. It's like, well, yeah, you can't, you got to go grab your keys. Like, I'm sorry, you can't get in the car until you go grab your keys.
Do we want to fuss over this, or do we actually want to get the thing, Like, yeah. There might be like a temporary, oh no, I'm not getting a dopamine fix from this right now. So like it must suck, right? But I'm with you. Like you were describing this and I was kind of chuckling because I taught a camp last spring, like a small, like private kind of thing. And one of the guys kind of challenged me on, I was talking about ear training and learning the melody this way and just almost kind of hunting and pecking to find it on your guitar. There's something magical that happens to like the mind mapping of your instrument if you can just kind of suffer through that exercise for a little bit, and I was even phrasing it as such, and he just raised his hand and like innocently, and I, like, this is not to like knock on anyone, he was like, isn't it just easier if I learn it from the tab? And I said, well, let's define easier
and learning.
Yeah, exactly.
What is actually having learned something?
Yeah, you're learning how to read pointillistic dots in a linear fashion, but do you memorize those things? Like, can you hear the melody to the tune that you just played afterward? All that stuff that we were just talking about, right? So, like, I like the way that you said it, because it is like, if you're not excited about it, it's hard to get excited about it because the work seems really daunting. But listen from 2 chill dudes who are just regular guys, like, we did it, and it is really fulfilling, right? Like I'm
gonna do it. I promise I'm going to do it.
Well, you've accomplished it maybe on one instrument, and now we're just kind of retrofitting for your new project.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard for me to communicate this sometimes, but when you get people to do it, you don't have to convince them, right? You kind of just have to get them to do it, and then they see that this is how music actually works. This is what it really is. Yeah, I had the same thing at a camp. Someone asked, it was kind of just like, I disagree. I think I learn a lot faster with tablature, right? And it's so fascinating because it's kind of in a way, I can't dispute that, where I'm just like, you get exactly what you want from tablature. That's probably really true. But that means we're kind of talking about different things, right? We're not, the thing I'm trying to get, seems like you're trying to get something else. And then I have to communicate like, would you like to try what I'm trying to do? Because I think that's kind of special. And I think it's which is not to say like, certainly I'll always caveat that tablature can be a really helpful tool for a lot of reasons. But the, just when you think about what the music is, what it means to hear something, like some people have never been able to hear a melody and kind of like make the connection between that and another thing they've heard, or where that might be in the instrument or something. It's like, if you haven't had that experience, then yeah, you would probably be skeptical, or why would I do the more difficult option? But it's like so many things worth doing. It's that like the practice of doing it is the reward of doing it. You know what I mean? Is like
Yes.
It's like exercising. It's like you're taking it in your own hands, right? You're kind of like you're controlling your own destiny in a way. It's cool. We were talking about this. Different ways to optimize your practicing and be more efficient.
Yeah.
And spend less time, whatever. There's so many great ways that you can practice better. But then, as we were talking about this, we kind of realized that like we do a lot of those things now, but we didn't do those things for most of the stuff we've learned. Most of the stuff we learned is an insatiable, just like undeniable urge to just like, I have to go listen to this record. I have to see what this person is playing. I have to transcribe this. I have to practice this until I have it. I have to practice. It's not like, okay, I set up, here's my 5-minute block where I'm going to do my ear training, and then here's my 5-minute block where I'm going to do my metronome, which if that works, it's great. And there's plenty of ways that I try to do that now that I have less free time, but I try to impress upon people that you're going to learn a lot if you cannot be stopped, if you cannot be pulled away from your instrument because you're so driven. It's like, it doesn't really matter how you do it. You're going to find out the best way to do it because you want it that bad, right? You're not going to spend a year practicing the wrong way, because if it's not working, you say, I have to do something different because I need this information. So there's a self-guided element there, where it's like but once you have to get a taste first. You have to get a taste of, hey, that lick that so-and-so played there would work really well in this other song. As soon as you notice that, it's like everything is open,
Yeah. Well, like you said, getting a taste of it, experiencing that first G run in time with the band or whatever, that whatever the thing happens to be. I love that, man. Yeah. Cultivating passion. And I think it's a mindset shift thing too. I learned this one hack, and maybe this is the, for people who are like, okay, how do I get out of my mindset? How do I cultivate passion? And there's like a simple trick that you can kind of like play on yourself, where like if you notice yourself kind of like making a fear-based decision, like, oh, I'm not doing this thing because like whatever, like it scares me, or like, I don't feel like practicing. Like, you can, psychologist was saying that if you say, I get to do this thing, like if you just make that small like shift in your mind, it's like, I get to pick up my guitar and like figure out 2 notes that Tony Rice played. You know what I mean? Like what a cool thing. I have enough like space and time and money in my life where I can afford one of these things and use one of these things to listen through these things to like hear those, you know what I mean? So it's like a small cascade effect, but if you can just kind of like, you know what I mean? Like do like a small mindset shift, like say that you are finding it hard to find the motivation for practice these days, like just try that with something. I get to watch this Eli Gilbert lesson on YouTube,
don't need any motivation for that, folks, I'll tell you. No, but it's, and part of it too, it's like if you're struggling to find that motivation, it's some people think that there's a list of stuff they have to know. That's like, this is the need to know. Certainly you want to work on your technique and your ability to play rhythm. And you're like, there's some stuff that's going to help you no matter what you want to learn. But there's no list of like tunes you have to know, people you have to play like. That doesn't exist. There's tunes that a lot of people know, and there's players that a lot of people have studied, but it's up to you. So it's like part of it too is like there's some bravery involved, being like, I'm not going to do all the Tony Rice licks. I'm going to learn all the Don Reno guitar stuff or whatever. It's like which not as many people do. So you kind of have to be like, okay, it's not my responsibility to play everything everyone's ever played. What is the thing what's the most frictionless choice I can make in terms of something I'm excited about? Like that's the key, is like, it's really up to you to decide that.
I love that, man. I think that's a great spot to leave our Flatpick audience here.
Yes.
So
I was just thinking that if we don't, this will be like every other conversation we have, which is that it's like 3 hours.
Yeah. Well, yeah, actually the next 2 episodes are just going to be our next 2 hours of talking after we pause right now,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
No, that's funny, man. Well, Eli, it's official, man. We've started the Flatpicking Podcast.
Hard to believe. This is, if you're listening to this now, well, first of all, that means you listened to this whole podcast episode, so commend you for that. But then that means we actually figured out how to upload a podcast. I guess you already know how to upload podcasts, so we'll be fine. But what I will say, there's a lot of things as of recording of this podcast that we have not figured out. For instance, exactly where we're going to send you to check this out, where you're listening to this currently. We will be including links and directions for all future, directions we need to give you in all the relevant places, descriptions of YouTube videos. You'll find it wherever podcasts are, that sort of thing. As we figure this out, we'll probably tell you more of this stuff at the top of the episode, but I promise we could not be less prepared to record this podcast episode now. So bear with us. But Hayes, where can the folks find all the fine things that you're doing on the internet and in the real world?
Absolutely. If you guys are interested in checking out any of the educational materials that I offer, I teach a lot of flatpick guitar and mandolin. You can find me at youtube.com/Hayes Griffin. That's HayesGriffin. And if you want to study with me, you can go to hayesgriffin.club. That's right, .club, CLUB. And would love to be in touch with you folks there. What about you, Eli?
So in the flat picking world, I now have a presence online as I'm officially a flat picker. I have a YouTube channel called Eli Gilbert Guitar, where I'm making every couple of days a practice log of stuff that I've been practicing, so you can follow along with that if you'd like to. Some people find that kind of interesting to hear me talk about what pick I'm using. Maybe we'll talk about this in the next episode. But I've been playing.
Absolutely. There's some really cool cameos on that channel as well from some really high-profile flat pickers and mandolin players. No,
I'm still paying them off. I have a couple more installments to pay Hayes and David for jamming with me in a couple of those episodes. I'll never financially recover from those videos. But so you can check those out. And then if you want to learn to play banjo for some reason, then you can search Eli Gilbert Banjo as well. And that's where I talk with authority on things that I understand.
Absolutely.
And other than that, I think for this inaugural episode of the Flat Picking Podcast, that's going to do it.
Awesome. Well, it's been great, buddy. We'll catch you guys on the next episode.